So today we're making a gluten-free and dairy-free tiramisu. As you can see just there, it's super delicious. So I'm going to start by making the sponge. You could just buy pre-made sponge fingers, gluten-free, dairy-free sponge fingers, or if you have leftover sponge cake you could use that. But I'm just going to start by making the sponge cake. So firstly I'm measuring out 225 grams flour, and that's gluten-free, self-raising flour. I use the Dove's Farm flour, but use whatever usual self-raising flour you use. So I'm just adding that to my bowl. Next I'm going to add in some xanthan gum and baking powder to that. So I'm just going to do a teaspoon of xanthan gum, or half a teaspoon, and then a teaspoon of baking powder to that, just to make it really light and fluffy. As always, make sure all your ingredients are suitable for your allergies. So I'm just mixing that through. Next I'm adding sugar. So I'm going to do 225 grams of sugar. That's actually granulated, but you can use granulated or caster. Next I'm measuring out batter using the stalk batter, and I'm going to do 225 grams of that too. It's a very simple sponge cake. Into the bowl that goes. And then to that we just need to add 4 eggs. So I'm just going to crack my eggs into a separate bowl. And these are medium eggs, so I'm doing 4 medium eggs. And then I'll add them into my bowl. This tiramisu is really great, and it doesn't take long to set at all. So if you're worried about timings, I'd say it probably only takes about an hour for you to be good to cut straight into it. So I'm just going to add those there into the bowl and get rid of these eggshells. Then we'll mix up that cake batter. Got a bit of flour everywhere. So just give that a good mix, making sure I've got my oven preheated to about 175 degrees Celsius. So I'm just mixing that until it looks pretty well mixed through. So that looks good to me. Oops. I accidentally turned it on whilst I picked it up, stood it up. So I'm just moving that over, and then I'm going to get that into a cake pan. But first I need to prep my cake pan. So I'm just going to lay a layer of baking paper over the bottom, just to prevent it from getting all stuck to the bottom. And then I'm just going to grease it with some of that, get rid of some of the excess baking powder, and then I'm going to grease it with some of the batter that I used earlier, the dairy-free batter. You could just use a bit of oil or spray or something. then I'm going to get that cake batter into the cake pan. It's quite thick cake batter, so it's quite easy to move around. In that goes into the cake pan. Because the cake batter is a bit thicker, it's a bit harder to spread around the cake tray, but it is really yummy cake, and you could definitely just have this as a normal sponge cake, like a Victoria sponge or something. So now I just need to get that into the oven for about 25-35 minutes until it's golden. Here you can see it's come out the oven. It's nice and springy. It's cooled down a little bit here, so it's nice and spongy. Then I'm going to measure out the coffee that will need to cool in the fridge for a little minute, for about 10 minutes before we use it. I'm using about 2 teaspoons of espresso powder. That's the Nespresso espresso powder. And then I'm going to add about 150 ml of hot water to that. So I'm just using my thumb so I can see where I'm measuring it out to, because the lines are a bit faded on the jug. Mix that through and then pop that into the fridge or just on the side for 20 minutes to cool down before we add it to our sponge to layer it up. So in that time, in the meantime, I'm going to measure out the ingredients for the cream of it. So first I'm using the dairy-free Philadelphia cream cheese, and I'm using 150 grams of dairy-free Philadelphia, dairy-free and gluten-free. You could use a different cream cheese, that's up to you, but this is my preferred one. I found it works really well. So I'm going to start with that. It's basically the entire tub. So I think it's actually about 145 grams. So 145 grams of dairy-free cream cheese. Then I'm going to measure out the icing sugar into that. I'm going to use 70 grams icing sugar. Let that powder go everywhere. Then I'm going to add some Marsala wine, and I'm going to add about 3 very generous tablespoons of Marsala wine. You can use other alcohols, but I just like the Marsala wine the best. I think it's very flavourful. And then I need to mix that. But just before I'm mixing it, I'm going to add in some vanilla essence as well. Just about, I don't know, a dash, about 2 teaspoons, a teaspoon worth. And then we'll get that on to mix. I've used a hand mixer many times, or now I'm using a stand mixer. Stand mixer does the job slightly quicker, but if you've got a hand mixer instead, you can do that, or you could mix it by hand as well. That might take a while, but you could definitely do that as well. So I'm just going to get that on and mixed up. Just making sure all the bits are off the side. So once that's mixed through, I'm going to add in some dairy-free whipping cream. My favourite dairy-free whipping cream is the Elmlea dairy-free whipping cream. I find that works really well. Or, in fact, I think it's changed names now. I think, is it the Outpro whipping cream? Flora, the Flora Plant Power whipping cream. That's really good. So I'm just using one full carton of that. So that's 225 ml, I believe. One thing of whipping cream. Again, you can use your favourite one, but this one's the one that I've found works really well and sets up really well as well. So that whips up quite quickly. So it's just whipping through until we have pretty stiff peaks in it. So just stopping now the whipping process. As I pick it up, you can see the cream stays stuck in the whisk. It's very thick now, which is perfect. Give it a quick taste test. It's delicious. So now we've got all our parts ready, our sponge cake, our coffee and our cream, all ready to assemble the tiramisu. So it comes together really quickly. It's a super easy tiramisu recipe. So I'm just going to pop that to the side and grab out the cake, which has cooled down now. And I had it covered just to keep it safe. So I'm just going to take that out of the pan. As you can see, not stuck at all. I was going to lift it up here, but then I was like, what am I doing? I can just cut it on that. But as you can see, the cake stays together nicely. So I'm just going to grab a knife and then get cutting this cake. So if you do just get pre-made cake, then you don't need to worry about this step, obviously, or the cake steps. And you can just layer your cake straight into your, if you've got sponge fingers, just straight into your serving dish. I'm doing one big serving dish, and that Pyrex, as you can see there. But I have previously done it into little martini glasses, into coffee mugs, into lots of things. So it's just kind of your preference how you want to do it. So because I'm doing it into this big one, I'm going to cut it lengthways, and then I'm just going to cut those in half. And then I'm going to layer that into the bottom of my dish. You could just do a one layer tiramisu, so you could just have the coffee and cake on the bottom and then the cream on top and call it that. But I'm doing a 2-layer. You can do many layers. It's completely up to you. I quite like a 2-layer. I quite like the thick layers of cream, but you of course can mix it up and do quite thin layers of cake and thin layers of cream. So once you feel like you've got a good layer of cake on the bottom, then you can grab your coffee, which hopefully is cooled down by now. Don't use hot coffee or it'll melt your cream, and that will be unfortunate. So once your coffee has cooled down, you can just pour a nice layer of coffee onto the bottom, onto this cake, until you feel that although it's got enough coffee, until it's quite soggy. The cake, of course, will absorb it. So just grabbing that coffee and pouring a good amount on top. If you feel like you haven't got enough, you can always make more and let it cool down. So I'm using about that much. It's a good amount. making sure it's nice and wet. Just done a bit more. It will spread anyway, it will absorb. And then yeah, once you feel like you've got enough coffee, time to add your cream. I do make up a bit more coffee for the next layer, but I just like a lot of coffee. Now to add the cream, just add, well, because I'm doing it in 2 layers, I'm going to add about half now and then half the next layer. But obviously, if you want to just do 1 layer, then you can add it all now. Or obviously, if you want to do 3, then you'd add a third, and then a third, and then a third. As you can see, it spreads nicely. You don't have to worry about it being too runny or anything. If it's runny, just whip it up for some longer. So I'm just going to speed through me making this next layer. So all I'm doing is just layering another layer of cake again, covering it in more coffee, and then I'll add the last of the cream. So as you can see, I do run out of coffee, so I do grab some more. So once you feel like you've got a good layer of cream on top, then you can add some cocoa powder on top as well. I guess that's personal preference, whether you like cocoa powder on top of your tiramisu. I think traditionally it does tend to have cocoa powder on the top. I love cocoa powder on the top. So next I'm just going to open some cocoa powder. I was just going to sprinkle it on like that, but it's coming out quite thick. My siev's in the wash, so I don't want to grab the sieve out, so I'm just popping it onto the lid of the cocoa powder and then pressing it so it kind of breaks up a bit, and then I'm just going to sprinkle that on top. Add as much or as little as you like, and here you could have some fun with it and maybe use some cookie cutters or something to make a shape out of the cocoa powder. Like you could do a heart on it or something like that. If you cut out maybe a baking paper piece in the shape of the heart and put it on top, then sprinkle the cocoa powder on top, then take that piece off, obviously you'd have a heart in front. So just as much or as little as you like. And then really that's just our tiramisu assembled right there. So I'm just going to cover that. As you can see, lovely and delicious layers. If you've got it in separate ones, you'd obviously want to cover your separate containers and pop it in the fridge. I'm just going to cover that, pop it in the fridge for at least half an hour. I think mine was in the fridge for about 2 hours. Let it properly cool through, and then enjoy at your dinner party. I hope you enjoy.